Deep Dive, the show that cuts through the noise. We dive deep into the crucial insights that impact your life and, well, your money. Today, we are unlocking something really quite remarkable, a monumental safeguard for your financial future. We're talking Social Security.
A big one.
Yeah, and how understanding a recent, pretty pivotal policy shift alongside some honestly incredibly powerful financial strategies could significantly boost your payments, ensure they arrive predictably, and maybe even put substantially more money directly into your pocket than you might have ever thought possible.
It's definitely worth understanding the details here.
So let's embark on this journey. We're deep diving into some surprising new developments impacting Social Security, the focus, how these changes and, strategic actions can really benefit current and future beneficiaries.
Right.
Our mission today is kind of twofold. First, to help you grasp a recent, very impactful policy shift that could directly affect the stability, the longevity of your Social Security checks. And second, to arm you with practical, actionable financial strategies. Things designed to maximize those benefits, potentially increasing your monthly income for years to come.
Things people can actually do.
Exactly. Our insights today, they're drawn from two key sources. Q&A, Social Security's $1 trillion safeguard, a policy shift's impact, and unraveling Social Security policy benefits and future. And joining me, as always, is our expert guide, ready to synthesize all this info and really illuminate why this matters so profoundly to you.
Well, thank you. What's truly fascinating here is watching how a seemingly subtle shift in policy, right?
Yeah.
Something many might overlook.
Yeah, in the daily news cycle.
Exactly. How that can have such monumental financial reverberations for millions of Americans who depend on Social Security. We're going to unpack how this change positively impacts the very stability and predictability of the benefit system.
Right.
And ultimately, how it safeguards potential financial growth for beneficiaries. It's about understanding the mechanics first, and then, maybe most importantly, empowering yourself to act on that knowledge.
Absolutely. And that leads us directly into what some folks have dubbed the $1 trillion gift to Social Security. Now, framing it that way is, I think, crucial because it's not about, new money magically appearing out of thin air.
No, not at all.
It's about a critical preventative measure, something that safeguards benefits, effectively averting a much, much worse financial scenario that could have drastically reduced payments for millions.
Averted is the key word there.
Right. So to really grasp the significance of this gift, it's crucial to understand what was initially on the table. What were those earlier proposals and why would they have had such a dire impact on your future payments?
Precisely. Let's cast our minds back a bit to earlier campaign proposals that, if they had been fully implemented, would have indeed had a profoundly negative impact on Social Security solvency. The original plan, it involved two distinct yet equally significant components. Both posed direct threats to the trust fund's ability to pay out full benefits.
So let's break those down. Let's understand just how dire their financial effects would have been for your Social Security checks. The first major component was large-scale deportation.
Right.
We've heard a lot about undocumented immigrants, but what many people maybe don't realize is their significant, albeit indirect contribution to the Social Security system.
That's a critical point, and it's often misunderstood. Estimates show that undocumented immigrants contribute over $30 billion annually into Social Security taxes.
$30 billion a year? Wow. How does that happen if they don't have legal Social Security numbers?
Well, they primarily do so by working, often using fake Social Security numbers or maybe individual taxpayer identification numbers, ITINs, usually in industries like agriculture, construction, and hospitality.
Okay.
Now, here's the absolutely crucial part. This is what makes their contributions effectively like a donation to the trust fund. Yeah, because they are not legally authorized to work in the country, they are completely ineligible to receive Social Security benefits of any kind. No retirement, no disability, no survivor benefits.
Nothing. Yeah.
They also can't get Medicare or Medicaid, with only, extremely rare life-threatening emergency exceptions, like an ER visit where papers aren't checked.
So essentially, they're paying into a system from which they can never directly benefit. That estimated $30 billion isn't just a number. It represents a continuous annual infusion of funds into the Social Security Trust Fund with no corresponding outflow for benefits to those specific individuals. It's just a net gain for the system.
Exactly. It's pure inflow in that sense. So if the mass deportations, as they were initially proposed, had been fully implemented across all industries, all individuals, this $30 billion yearly income stream, it would have been entirely removed from the Social Security Trust Fund.
Gone.
Just gone. Imagine that financial hole. Over a single decade, that adds up to a staggering $300 billion gone from Social Security's coffers.
$300 billion.
Yeah.
Over 10 years.
Yes. It's a substantial and consistent contribution that acts as a vital stabilizing force for the system right now.
And that wasn't the only proposal that would have hit the trust fund hard, right? Another significant promise was to eliminate taxes on Social Security benefits.
Yeah.
How would that have impacted the system and, by extension, the amount of money beneficiaries actually receive?
Right. So currently, approximately $60 billion from the taxation of Social Security benefits flows directly back into the trust fund each year.
$60 billion. Okay.
So if this policy had passed, eliminating those taxes, it would have created yet another substantial drain on the fund, on top of the proposed deportation-related losses.
Double whammy.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And it's also worth noting that, about 40 to 50% of people already don't pay taxes on their Social Security benefits anyway, usually because their income is below the threshold.
Right. Lower income folks mostly.
Exactly. So eliminating these taxes would have primarily benefited higher income beneficiaries while simultaneously making the financial challenges worse for the system that supports all beneficiaries. It just means less money coming in to pay benefits for everyone.
So, okay, if we were to combine the potential impact of those two original proposals, the mass deportations and eliminating taxes on benefits, what would the total financial hit have been over, say, a decade?
The combined effect is truly eye-opening. And quite alarming when you think about the impact on current and future payments. If both of these original proposals had been fulfilled, they would have collectively removed an estimated $1 trillion over just 10 years from Social Security's incoming revenue.
$1 trillion.
$1 trillion. That colossal loss would have pushed the Social Security Trust Fund into depletion, probably about 3 to 4 years earlier than the current projection of 2034.
So instead of 2034, we'd be looking at like 2030, 2031?
Roughly, yeah. We would have been facing a much more immediate and frankly severe crisis.
And what would that earlier depletion have meant for the actual benefit checks, the checks millions of people rely on? How would that translate into dollars and cents for our listeners?
Well, it would have almost certainly led to steeper benefit cuts for everyone. And those cuts would have arrived much, much sooner.
Steeper cuts. How much steeper?
Instead of the currently projected 20% reduction in benefits when the trust fund runs out around 2034,
right,
we could have been looking at cuts closer to 30%. And like you said, those cuts hitting around 2030 or 2031.
Okay, so let's put that in perspective. Say you're getting a $2,000 monthly Social Security benefit. A 20% cut means losing $400, right? Down to $1,600.
Correct.
But a 30% cut, that's losing $600 from that same $2,000, leaving you with just $1,400.
Exactly. That additional $200 reduction per month, that's $2,400 less per year, is a really substantial sum. And that's what this $1 trillion gift, this policy shift, helps to prevent.
Ah, I see. So it's not just avoiding a cut, it's avoiding a deeper and an earlier cut.
Precisely. Yeah. Which directly translates into more money remaining in your pocket than would have otherwise been the case if those original proposals went through.
Okay, that makes it very clear. Preventing a 30% cut when, a 20% cut is still potentially looming.
Yeah.
It's like avoiding an extra 10% loss on every single future payment.
That's a good way to think about it, yes.
So now we turn to the pivotal policy shift. What exactly changed in the stance on this issue? And how did this change avert such a potentially catastrophic outcome for Social Security, effectively becoming this $1 trillion safeguard?
Right. This is where the narrative shifts from potential crisis to averted catastrophe. Recently, there was a significant alteration in the stance on mass deportations.
Okay.
Instead of widespread expulsions targeting, various industries and all documented individuals, the new policy focus shifted. It became about targeting undocumented immigrants, primarily in specific democratic power centers, large cities like Los Angeles, New York, Chicago.
Ah, so targeting specific cities.
Yes. And the key expectation from this strategic shift is that immigrants from these targeted cities might choose to relocate.
Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are setting our sights on a piece of proposed...
On SSI today, Supplemental Security Income. It's totally distinct from SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance, although, the analysis highlights the sheer number of people here. We're talking nearly 8 million people who rely on SSI for, well, essential support.
Nearly 8 million. Wow. That number really underscores why any proposed changes are so significant. And, contrasting with that sort of broader feeling of uncertainty, this particular analysis introduces the proposed SSI Restoration Act with a decidedly optimistic tone. It frames it as potentially highly beneficial. It even goes so far as to describe it as possibly the best piece of legislation out there, specifically for SSI reform.
Yeah, that's strong phrasing. It immediately signals that, at least from this perspective, the proposed act is aiming to tackle some core, really long-standing issues in a meaningful way.
So, if you're one of those millions of people who depend on SSI, or maybe you care about someone who does, you'll want to stick with us. Because this deep dive into the proposed SSI Restoration Act, based on this explanation we have, it's going to lay out what could potentially be on the horizon. And the potential here isn't just small tweaks, it involves some pretty significant financial improvements. We're talking potentially a substantial boost to your monthly payment, maybe getting rid of that financial penalty for being married, and being allowed to keep significantly more of your own savings without risking your eligibility. That's the kind of transformative potential this analysis is talking about. More money, potentially.
Exactly. These aren't minor adjustments being discussed here. According to this analysis, these are the kinds of changes that could fundamentally shift financial ground for millions of beneficiaries.
Okay, let's get right to the heart of it then. The most immediate question anyone looking at this proposed legislation is going to ask, and it's one the analysis anticipates, is, did it pass? Has the SSI Restoration Act passed? Are these potentially exciting changes a done deal right now?
Right. And the analysis is, very clear on this. Crystal clear, actually. As of the time this source material was put together, the answer is unequivocally no. It has not passed yet. Now, this is absolutely critical context. It grounds our whole discussion today. While we're about to unpack the specific, potentially life-changing provisions inside this proposed act, it's vital for everyone listening to understand we're exploring what could happen if this legislation were to, successfully make it through the whole process and become law.
Right, so think of it like getting a detailed look at a possible future, a blueprint maybe, for significant improvements, but definitely acknowledging that future hasn't arrived yet. The analysis also points out that many of the individual pieces of this larger proposed act, things like raising asset limits or dealing with the marriage penalty, they've also been introduced in Congress as separate standalone bills.
And importantly, the analysis notes that those standalone bills haven't passed either. So whether you look at the act as this big comprehensive package or you look at its key parts introduced on their own, they are still in the proposal stage. The effort to get these changes enacted is definitely ongoing, but they are not current law. Not yet.
Understood. But exploring the details of what's being proposed is still incredibly valuable, I think. It shows us the specific path that advocates and some legislators are pushing for to reform SSI. And based on this analysis, it shows the sheer scale of the positive impact that could happen if it were to pass. And according to this analysis, the first provision we should dig into is probably the one with the broadest, most immediate financial impact for the largest number of people. It's about raising SSI benefits to the federal poverty line.
Yeah, this is definitely presented as one of the most popular and, you could argue, the most significant proposed change in the act. The core idea is simple. Raise the maximum SSI benefit level for individuals and for couples up to 100% of the federal poverty line, the FPL.
Okay, let's really dig into the numbers here, the ones provided in the analysis, because this is where that potential financial benefit really comes into focus. The analysis states that for 2025, the current maximum monthly SSI benefit for an individual is $967.
Right, $967. That's the baseline. And the analysis contrasts that with the federal poverty line for a household of one person in 2025, which it says is $1,304 per month.
Okay, so the proposed increase under this act would be the difference between that current 967 max and the 1,367 on their poverty line. Let me see. Doing the math, it's a difference of $337 more per month.
Which the analysis really highlights as a substantial jump. And translating that $337 monthly increase into a percentage. The analysis calculates it as just under 35% specifically. They say 34.8% or maybe slightly higher. The analysis emphasizes, this would be an immediate, really significant boost for someone who's currently getting the maximum benefit. We're talking over $4,000 more per year. That's potentially a lot more money.
Yeah, think about what an extra $337 a month actually means for someone trying to get by on $967.
Well, it's not just a little bit more pocket money. That could be the difference between affording, 3 meals a day and sometimes having to skip one, or paying for necessary medication versus trying to stretch doses, keeping the lights on versus facing shutoff notices. This analysis really frames it not just as a raise, but potentially as the ability to live with a basic level of dignity and security that maybe the current benefit doesn't always allow for.
And the proposal doesn't just stop at a one-time bump up to the FPL. The second part of this, and it's equally crucial according to the analysis, is indexing future benefits to stay at parity with the federal poverty line. The analysis clarifies that parity here just means being equal to, or the equivalent of.
Okay, let's unpack that concept indexing to stay at parity. Why is that second part so important based on what the analysis says? Well, the significance, as they explain it, is that without this indexing piece, even if benefits were raised to the FPL right now, they would just inevitably fall behind again over time. It's almost guaranteed. See, the federal poverty line, it gets adjusted annually based on inflation and other economic factors. The analysis argues pretty strongly that the SSI program is currently failing the beneficiaries precisely because the benefits haven't kept pace with rising costs and those adjustments to the poverty measure over decades. So this provision, the indexing part, it's designed to fix that fundamental ongoing problem. It aims to ensure that in future years, as the FPL goes up, the maximum SSI benefit would automatically adjust upwards, too, to stay at that poverty level.
Okay, so it's not just about getting to the FPL now, it's about permanently linking the benefit to it, preventing that erosion of purchasing power that SSI recipients have apparently been dealing with for years.
Precisely. And the analysis gives some valuable historical context here, too. It notes that when the SSI program was originally set up, way back in the 1970s, the benefits were actually intended to be set at a level of the federal poverty line. But over time, they just haven't been updated properly to maintain that relationship. So the proposed indexing isn't just some new idea. The analysis presents it more like a restoration of the program's original intent, to provide an income floor that actually lifts people out of poverty, or at least gets them up to that basic poverty threshold.
That historical context really clarifies the goal. It sounds like the program was designed with a specific aim, and the analysis is arguing that current benefits have drifted so far from that aim, they're not really fulfilling their purpose anymore. And this provision, raising benefits to the FPL and keeping them there, it's presented as the way to correct that drift. The analysis uses the phrase life-changing to describe the potential impact of just this one change. And when you look at an extra, $337 a month, plus the security of knowing your benefit will keep pace.
Yeah, you can see why. It offers the potential for significantly improved financial stability, not just like a temporary fix.
Yeah, for nearly 8 million people, that combination, the immediate substantial increase in the long-term security of indexing that would be truly transformative. It directly tackles the core problem the analysis identifies. The program, as it is now, is failing its beneficiaries because the benefit level just isn't adequate for living in 2025. All right, let's move on to the second significant provision that this analysis highlights, removing the marriage penalty. This is presented as another major proposed change, although, as you said, it affects a more specific group within the SSI population.
Right. This provision targets what the analysis describes as a particularly unfair aspect of the current SSI rules. As it explains, people receiving SSI currently face a financial penalty simply for being married.
A penalty for being married. I mean, in the context of a support program, that does sound, well, counterintuitive, maybe even discriminatory.
It does seem that way. And the SSI Restoration Act, according to this analysis, proposes to eliminate this penalty entirely. The analysis actually expresses a pretty strong viewpoint on this, calling the current penalty ridiculous and stating very clearly that it should be gone.
The analysis even adds kind of a relatable human touch, doesn't it? Mentioning that marriage itself can sometimes be challenging anyway, so imposing an extra financial penalty on top of that feels, well, unnecessary and just unfair to couples who rely on SSI.
Exactly. So how does this marriage penalty actually work right now, and how would removing it impact beneficiaries, according to this analysis?
Well, under the current rules, when two people who are each getting SSI benefits decide to get married, their combined eligibility and how their benefit is calculated changes. They're generally treated as a couple with combined income and resources, right? And their maximum possible benefit as a couple is actually less than the sum of what their individual maximum benefits would be if they just stayed single. For instance, in 2025, the individual max is $967. So two single individuals could potentially get $1,934 combined. But for a married couple, the current maximum is $1,451. That difference $1,934 versus $1,451. That is the penalty this act wants to get rid of. The proposed change would mean a married couple would be eligible for a combined benefit equal to two single individuals.
Ah, I see. So it's kind of a disincentive baked right into the benefit calculation structure. By removing this penalty, the proposed act would let married couples on SSI potentially see their combined income go up. It would bring it up to the level they might have received if they weren't married, essentially removing a financial punishment tied to their marital status.
Exactly. The analysis frames this as really a matter of fairness, equity. It allows people to make personal relationship choices without facing a direct financial hit from the very program that's supposed to support them. For the couples affected, this change could mean a pretty meaningful increase in their actual household income.
All right, let's move on to the third major provision detailed in the analysis, adjusting asset levels. This one focuses on the amount of cash or, financial assets an SSI beneficiary is allowed to have before their eligibility for benefits gets affected or even cut off.
Yes, and this is another area where the analysis argues very forcefully that the current rules are just drastically out of touch with reality in 2025. The current asset limits, as stated in the analysis, are set at just $2,000 for an individual SSI recipient and only $3,000 for a married couple.
And how long have these incredibly low limits been in place, according to the info provided?
The analysis makes a big point of this. These limits have stayed exactly the same for several decades.
Decades. Wow, $2,000, $3,000, unchanged for decades. I mean, that sounds like it would make things incredibly precarious given how much the cost of, everything has gone up.
Precisely, and that is the core argument the analysis makes for why this provision is so necessary. The proposed new asset limits within the SSI Restoration Act are a significant leap. They're proposing $10,000 for an individual and $20,000 for a married couple.
Okay, that's a massive increase. What is that? 5 times the current individual limit and more than 6 times the current couple's limit. Why does the analysis argue for such a huge jump?
Well, the analysis contends that the current limits are just far, far too low in today's economy because of inflation, because of the drastically reduced purchasing power of those dollar amounts compared to whenever the limits were actually set. They might have been maybe barely realistic decades ago, but today they're depicted as completely inadequate.
The analysis provides some really concrete, kind of everyday examples to drive this point home, doesn't it?
It does. It points out that major unexpected expenses that lots of households face, things like your refrigerator suddenly dying and needing a replacement, or the air conditioner breaking down in a heat wave, or needing significant, often really costly, repairs on an older car. Those things can easily cost $2,000 or even more.
And under the current rules, what happens if an SSI beneficiary has managed to save that $2,000 or $3,000 buffer, that tiny cushion against emergencies, and then one of those things happens? They have to spend their savings, maybe dipping below the limit briefly, or worse, what if the repair actually cost more than their total allowed savings?
According to the analysis, the consequence of going over that asset limit, even just temporarily because of an emergency expense, can lead to the SSI beneficiary losing their eligibility, potentially forfeiting their essential benefit income altogether.
Forfeiting your vital income because you had an emergency and used the minimal savings you were barely allowed to have in the first place. I mean, that highlights an extreme level of vulnerability, doesn't it?
It really does. The analysis emphasizes the extreme precariousness this creates. It says that with limits this low, people are, and I quote, literally only one event away from being financially wiped out and losing the essential income source they depend on for basic survival. It's basically impossible to build any meaningful financial security, any resilience against the unexpected, when your total allowed savings can be completely erased by a single appliance failure or one big car repair bill.
And yet $2,000 or $3,000 today just doesn't cover nearly as much as it did decades ago. The cost of everything, housing, food, transport, repairs, has all increased dramatically, while these limits just stayed frozen in time.
Exactly. So the proposed increase to $10,000 and $20,000 is presented by the analysis as absolutely necessary. Necessary to provide SSI beneficiaries with, a basic measure of financial security and stability. It would allow them to save a much more realistic amount for emergencies, like those big repairs we mentioned, or even maybe save towards a slightly more long-term goal without this constant fear of accidentally tripping over the limit and losing their benefits.
So this isn't just about letting people have a bit more money sitting in the bank, it's framed by the analysis as enabling them to actually build a small essential cushion against the unpredictable costs of life. It lets them handle unexpected expenses without being thrown into immediate financial crisis and potentially losing their core support. It really represents the potential to have and keep more money overall, either as savings for stability or just by preventing the loss of benefits because you went over these outdated limits.
Okay, so if we bring together these key potential changes outlined in the SSI Restoration Act, based on this detailed analysis we're looking at, well, the analysis describes it as a really significant package of benefits. Let's just quickly recap those three major potential financial improvements again.
Sure. First, there's the proposal to significantly raise the maximum monthly benefit, bringing it up to the federal poverty line for individuals and couples, and crucially, indexing it to stay at that level going forward. Second, the proposal to eliminate the marriage penalty, which currently reduces the combined benefit for married couples on SSI compared to what they'd get if they were single. And third, the proposal to dramatically increase the allowed asset limits from that $2,000, $3,000 level up to $10,000 and $20,000, providing a far greater level of financial security and the ability to actually handle unexpected costs.
Yeah, the analysis really drives home how impactful these changes could be. It uses terms like goal for SSI beneficiaries and positions the act itself as one of the really good ones that kind of checks all the boxes for necessary reform.
It's presented as a very comprehensive and targeted approach, aimed at addressing what this perspective sees as the most critical failings of the current program structure.
Okay, we've gone into quite a bit of detail on these potentially transformative provisions, but it's really vital, as the analysis reminds us over and over, to keep the current reality in mind.
And that reality, as stated very clearly in the analysis, is that despite all these potentially exciting benefits we've discussed, the SSI Restoration Act has, unfortunately, not passed yet. It remains proposed legislation.
So while it's crucial to understand what could happen, these are not changes that are actually enacted or being implemented today.
Correct. The analysis makes it very clear this is a legislative proposal. It needs to gain traction, it needs to move through Congress, and ultimately it needs to be signed into law. The effort to see these reforms become reality is presented as very much an ongoing fight, with advocates continuing to, as they put it, pound the table for these changes.
Right. And this brings us to the broader context, the kind of bigger picture that the analysis lays out, explaining why this proposed act and its provisions matter so deeply. It connects back to that overall assessment of the current state of the SSI program.
Yeah, the analysis perspective is pretty blunt, actually. It says that despite its important role, the SSI program as it currently operates is failing the beneficiaries.
Yeah.
It argues that the program needs a major overhaul and reform because, as we've discussed, the benefit levels have fallen way below the poverty line and haven't kept up with rising costs. And the rules, like those incredibly outdated asset limits, leave recipients extremely vulnerable, really without any kind of safety net against unexpected expenses.
So, the proposed changes detailed in the SSI Restoration Act, as they're presented in this analysis, they're framed as the essential necessary fixes, the things required to address these fundamental shortcomings. They seem designed to bring the program into the 21st century and ensure it actually provides the level of financial support and stability that the millions who rely on it desperately need, and perhaps that the program was originally intended to provide.
It's definitely a compelling picture that this analysis paints, highlighting that gap between the program's current limitations and the potential for it to truly serve as a reliable income floor and a source of real security.
What a deep and detailed look at this proposed legislation. We've explored the potential for a really significant increase in the monthly payment, potentially bringing it up by hundreds of dollars a month and keeping it there relative to poverty levels. We've seen how the Act proposes to eliminate a financial penalty tied just to being married within the program, and we've delved into the proposal to dramatically raise the amount of savings a beneficiary can hold, offering much-needed security against life's unexpected, often expensive, bumps in the road.
These are presented as potentially life-altering financial improvements for millions of people. More money, more stability. But it is absolutely vital to remember, as the analysis makes clear time and again, these are proposed changes. They're contained within the SSI Restoration Act, which is not yet passed into law.
Reflecting on the perspective presented in this analysis, the Act represents a potential, maybe a comprehensive, path forward. A way to fix a program that, while rooted in a crucial goal, is currently described as having fallen behind and, in some ways, failing the nearly 8 million beneficiaries it's meant to serve.
So here is something maybe to consider as you reflect on this deep dive. Ponder the tangible, real-world impact these potential changes could have on the daily lives of millions. That extra $337 a month for food or utilities or medicine. The ability to save $5,000, maybe even $10,000 for a true emergency without risking your income. The freedom for couples to marry without a financial penalty from the program. And alongside that, consider what it might actually take for such significant reforms, aimed at restoring a program to its intended purpose, to move from being a proposal on paper to becoming a reality. Imagine a significant financial boost heading your way. We're talking potentially thousands of dollars, a truly substantial amount that could, fundamentally reshape how you manage money, possibly arriving early in the new year. What if there was a proposed change, something that could reduce your taxable income down to, virtually zero, freeing up so much more of what you earn for, your daily needs, peace of mind? And what if a simple, quick, and completely free conversation could put an average of an additional, get this, $1,100 back into your pocket every single year, like an annual bonus just for, being informed. Get ready, because today we're diving deep into some really incredible opportunities designed to maximize your financial well-being. We're going to unpack exactly how you, our listener, could benefit from these powerful changes and strategies, making sure more money stays where it belongs. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're cutting through the noise, getting straight to the most important nuggets of knowledge regarding some truly impactful financial developments, specifically for seniors.
Our mission, as always, is to explore these proposed changes, particularly in the senior standard deduction, and other valuable strategies that can mean significant financial relief, more money in your pocket, essentially. We've gathered insights from various places, detailed Q&A documents, legislative proposals, expert analyses, all focused on bringing you clear, actionable information. We know you value clear structure, engaging delivery, and a pace that respects your time. You want those aha moments without feeling overloaded. Maybe even a roadmap for what to do next. That's precisely what this deep dive aims to deliver. And as always, I'm joined by our expert who brings that calm and insightful voice of reason, synthesizing diverse information and connecting the dots to really explain not just what is happening, but crucially, why it matters to you directly. Okay, let's unpack this. And it really is exciting news. We're talking about a significant proposed change here, something far beyond just a minor tweak. This is major potential financial benefit designed specifically with seniors in mind. And for many of you, we absolutely understand that every dollar truly counts. We know managing finances, maybe on a fixed income, can present unique challenges, right? And that's precisely why this news is so compelling. So the Senate is currently discussing a proposal that could have a massive impact, providing an additional $6,000 deduction for seniors age 65 and over. Now, this is a crucial distinction, and it's one we want to be incredibly clear about because it's easy to misunderstand. This isn't a direct payment that will just, show up in your bank account.
Exactly. That's a key point.
Right. And it's also not an increase to your Social Security benefits themselves. Instead, think of it as a powerful financial lever. It works by reducing the income you are actually taxed on. Maybe picture it like this. Your total income for the year is a pie. A deduction is like taking a slice out of that pie before the government calculates how much tax you owe on the rest.
A bigger slice out means less pie left to tax.
Precisely. The bigger the deduction slice, the less of your income is subject to tax. And the scale of this potential impact is, it's immense. If this passes, this additional deduction would be available to all seniors age 65 and over. And yes, that absolutely includes those of you currently receiving Social Security benefits. When you look at the numbers, this proposal has the potential to impact over 70 million seniors across the country.
70 million, that's huge!
It really is. That's a huge segment of our population potentially benefiting. It really seems to reflect a growing recognition of the financial pressures many seniors face, and maybe a desire to provide a more impactful benefit.
What's fascinating here, as you said, is the sheer scale of the potential benefit and just how broadly it could impact the senior population. This isn't about some small niche group. It's really targeting a significant segment of our elders, acknowledging the financial realities faced by millions and millions of households today. And when we talk about why this is a big deal, it's precisely because a tax deduction, even though it's not, cash directly in hand like a stimulus check,
right,
it translates into very tangible financial relief. It directly reduces your taxable income, which ultimately means you keep more of the money you earn or receive. Let me put it another way, maybe more practically. Imagine you're in, say, the 12% federal income tax bracket. A $6,000 deduction doesn't mean you get a $6,000 refund.
Okay, that's important.
Very important. It means $6,000 of your income is simply no longer taxed at that 12% rate. So Doing the math, $6,000 times 12%, that directly translates to $720 less in federal income tax owed.
Wow, okay. $720 just from that deduction.
Exactly. It's a concrete, measurable saving. And this is why financial experts who are analyzing these proposals are, frankly, overwhelmingly positive about this specific Senate version. They're already seeing this larger amount, this $6,000 figure coming out of the Senate, as, well, a far more substantial and helpful measure for a vast number of seniors compared to, anything that's been seriously discussed before.
So it's a real step up.
It really is. It feels like a clear signal that there's a serious intent here to provide truly meaningful financial support.
Okay, so here's where the practical implications really come into focus. How does this actually translate into more money staying in your pocket? It's all about reducing your taxable income and, as you hinted, for many folks, potentially reducing it all the way down to zero.
Let's briefly touch on the basics first, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. When you file your tax return each year, you generally have a choice, right?
Correct. Standard or itemized. Exactly. You can either take the standard deduction, which is a set amount based on your filing status, age, etc., or you can itemize your deductions, things like medical expenses above a certain threshold, state and local taxes up to a limit, mortgage interest, charitable donations. For most people, especially after recent tax law changes that increased the standard deduction, taking the standard deduction is usually the simpler and often more financially advantageous way to go. Fewer headaches, often more money saved.
That's generally true for the vast majority of taxpayers now, yes.
Now, here's the good news that already exists. Seniors age 65 and over already get a bit of a boost. You can currently take an additional amount on top of the regular standard deduction.
Right, there's already an age bonus built in.
Yes, exactly. For an individual filing single, this additional amount is currently around $1,600, maybe a bit more, depending on the year's inflation adjustments. It's helpful, for sure. But the proposed change we're talking about today goes so much further. It offers a significantly enhanced financial advantage, layering a much bigger bonus on top. Let's look at some specific, relatable examples to make this really concrete, using the numbers floating around with this proposal. We know our listeners have diverse situations, different income levels, different concerns, and these proposals aim for broad relief. Okay, so let's imagine Eleanor. She's a widow, she's 72, and relies mostly on Social Security for her income, maybe a small pension. Her current standard deduction as an individual aged 65 or over is roughly $15,000. That combines the regular standard deduction for a single filer plus that existing $1,600-ish bonus for being over 65. Now, if this proposed change goes through and she gets that additional $6,000 bonus deduction on top of everything else.
It's the key. It's additional.
Right. Her total standard deduction would jump to a significant $21,000. That's the $15,000 base, plus the new $6,000 bonus. So for Eleanor, if her total adjusted gross income is, let's say, $20,000 a year, well, having a $21,000 standard deduction means her taxable income effectively becomes zero.
Completely wiped out for federal income tax purposes.
Exactly. She would pay absolutely no federal income tax. Think about what that means for someone like Eleanor. It translates directly into greater financial flexibility, less stress about monthly bills, or maybe an unexpected expense like a car repair.
Or affording prescriptions, or just having a little breathing room.
Absolutely. It could mean she can finally afford that small home repair she's been putting off, or just have more disposable income for groceries, maybe visit grandkids. It's real impact. But it gets even more impactful for married couples, especially where both spouses are 65 or over. Let's think about Mark and Susan. They're both 68. Maybe have some pension income. Mark still works part-time, perhaps.
A common scenario.
It's very common. Their current standard deduction as a married couple filing jointly, with both being over 65, is already pretty substantial, somewhere around $30,000. That includes the base married filing jointly amount, plus 2 of those smaller existing age bonuses. Now, with the proposed $12,000 bonus deduction, and this is crucial, it's $6,000 per person for each qualifying spouse.
So double the individual bonus if both are 65 plus.
Correct. Their total standard deduction could potentially reach an impressive $42,000. That's the $30,000 base they already get, plus this new $12,000 combined bonus. Just imagine having $42,000 of your combined income shielded from federal taxes before anything is even calculated.
That's a huge threshold.
It really is. So if Mark and Susan's combined adjusted gross income is, say, $40,000 for the year.
Which is a realistic income level for many retired or semi-retired couples.
Absolutely. Then, just like Eleanor in our single filer example, their taxable income would effectively drop to zero. They would owe no federal income tax. That $40,000 they earned or received, instead of having a chunk taken out for federal taxes, remains entirely in their hands, available for whatever they need or want.
The sense of security that provides must be immense.
No doubt. It allows for much greater freedom in their financial planning, whether it's for travel they've dreamed of, helping out their family, saving for future healthcare needs, or simply managing rising costs without constant anxiety.
And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, these deduction figures, the $21,000, the $42,000, they aren't just, minor adjustments. They're not just nibbling around the edges. For a significant number of seniors, this isn't just a small reduction in their tax bill. It truly has the power, as we've shown, to potentially wipe out their federal taxable income entirely.
That wipeout effect is really the headline here for many people, isn't it?
It absolutely is. It's the crucial takeaway for potentially millions. When your income falls at or below the significantly increased deduction threshold, your taxable income for federal purposes could effectively be reduced to $0. As you illustrated so well with Mark and Susan, a couple with $40,000 income, facing a $42,000 deduction, their income for tax purposes is literally counted as $0.
And zero income means?
Zero federal income tax liability, period. Think about the profound impact of that, especially for seniors living on fixed incomes, trying to stretch every dollar. Having no federal income tax liability can be a genuinely transformative force for their financial well-being. The higher these deduction numbers go, that $21,000 for individuals, the $42,000 for married couples where both qualified, the more of your income gets shielded or wiped out from taxation, counted as zero. And this directly leads to more money staying in your hands, available for your daily needs, for savings, for hobbies, for emergencies, for anything else that supports your quality of life. It provides immense financial flexibility and, perhaps just as importantly, peace of mind. It helps alleviate that constant worry, that background hum of anxiety about making ends meet or affording unforeseen expenses, which so many people experience.
Yeah, the peace of mind is invaluable. Now, this idea, the $6,000 boost, it didn't just appear out of thin air, did it? It's been part of an ongoing legislative discussion. To give everyone the full picture, let's maybe briefly track how this concept has progressed. Because understanding the journey, I think, makes the current Senate proposal seem even more significant, more exciting.
That's a good idea. Context is important.
Okay, so currently, as we mentioned, if you're a senior age 65 and over, you can take that additional standard deduction amount. On top of the regular one, for an individual, it's around $1,600 or so. That's our baseline today. Now, rewind about a month ago. The House of Representatives passed a bill, part of a larger tax package, that included their version of a senior deduction boost. They proposed a $4,000 boost to the standard deduction specifically for seniors age 65 and over. This would have effectively raised that additional amount from the current $1,600 up to $4,000.
So a noticeable increase from the current situation.
Definitely. And their proposal had it slated to be active for tax years 2025 through 2028. At the time, that was seen as a very positive development, a good step. But now here's the really impactful news, the update we're focusing on today. The Senate is pushing for an even larger increase, a substantial additional $6,000 deduction for seniors 65 and over.
A significant jump from the House version.
A very significant jump. This reflects a major enhancement of that initial proposal from the House. And here's why it's so much more advantageous, just looking at the numbers. This is $2,000 more per qualifying senior than what the House initially put forward.
That's a 50% increase over the House proposal's boost. That's not trivial.
Not at all. Our sources, the analyses we've seen, they're explicitly calling this Senate version a significantly better option and a much more robust benefit for seniors. It really demonstrates, or seems to demonstrate, a stronger commitment to providing more impactful financial relief. It feels like an evolution of the idea, maybe recognizing that the initial $4,000, while good, perhaps wasn't quite enough given today's economic climate for seniors.
Right, and this naturally raises an important question. Why the increase? Why did the Senate land on $6,000 when the House had seemingly settled on $4,000? While we can't know the exact closed-door discussions, it strongly suggests, as you said, a growing and perhaps more critical recognition of the very real financial pressures many seniors are facing right now.
Things like inflation, healthcare costs.
Exactly. Rising costs of living across the board, escalating healthcare expenses, which disproportionately affect older adults, the general inflationary environment we've all been dealing with. In that context, a $4,000 additional deduction, while certainly helpful, might have been assessed as, well, maybe not sufficient to provide the kind of truly transformative relief that perhaps a $6,000 deduction could offer.
Aiming for a bigger impact.
Precisely. There seems to be a clear desire here to provide a more impactful, more tangible benefit, one that truly moves the needle for individuals and couples, especially those on fixed incomes, allowing them greater financial breathing room. So yes, just to reinforce the core benefit here, the $6,000 proposal is a clear and undeniable win for seniors compared to the earlier $4,000 proposal. It indicates potentially a legislative body listening more closely to the needs of its constituents and striving to offer a more substantial measure of financial support. The goal seems to be ensuring more of your hard-earned money, your retirement savings, your Social Security remains in your pocket.
Okay, that comparison is really helpful. Now, it's crucial we address something else, something you might have heard floating around out there. It often gets maybe mixed up in discussions about tax benefits for seniors. I'm talking about the idea of no more taxes on Social Security. Expert, can you help us clarify how this proposed standard deduction boost fits into that conversation? Or maybe more importantly, how it doesn't fit in? I think many listeners might be wondering, does this mean my Social Security benefits won't be taxed anymore?
That's an excellent and extremely common question. And you're right, understanding these distinctions is absolutely vital for critical thinking when you're hearing about potential financial changes from various sources. So let's be unequivocally clear on this. This proposed standard deduction boost, this $6,000 extra deduction we've been discussing, it is entirely separate from and does not mean an end to the taxation of Social Security benefits.
Okay, categorical separation.
Categorical separation. That's a common misconception, maybe wishful thinking sometimes, but it's important we set the record straight definitively based on the proposals themselves. The fact is, under this specific proposal for the standard deduction increase, Social Security benefits will continue to be taxed for those whose income exceeds the established thresholds.
The current rules for taxing Social Security remain in place.
As far as this specific proposal is concerned, yes. Those rules aren't affected by this standard deduction change. And we can back this up with some hard data from our sources. The Social Security Board of Trustees, in their annual report, highlighted a, frankly, staggering figure. $55 billion, that's billion with a B. $55 billion in taxes were collected from seniors' Social Security benefits just last year alone.
Wow, $55 billion.
It's a significant amount of revenue. And it reflects the reality that for many seniors, particularly those with other sources of income besides Social Security, a portion of their benefits is currently subject to federal income tax. This proposed deduction boost doesn't alter that underlying mechanism. Now let's think about the broader impact, comparing this deduction boost to the separate idea of eliminating Social Security taxes altogether. It's useful to see who benefits from each approach. Eliminating taxes on Social Security would primarily benefit those seniors whose income is currently high enough to trigger that tax. Our sources estimate this affects about 30 million seniors directly.
Okay, so about 30 million would see a direct benefit if Social Security taxes were eliminated.
Correct. However, this proposed $6,000 boost to the standard deduction is designed differently. It's designed to be available to all seniors aged 65 and over who file taxes, regardless of whether their Social Security is currently taxed or not. That encompasses, as we mentioned earlier, over 70 million seniors.
Ah, so the reach is much broader, 70 million plus versus 30 million.
Exactly. This makes the standard deduction boost potentially a much broader, more universally impactful financial benefit for a far larger segment of the senior population. So while ending Social Security taxation might be a popular talking point in some circles, the current legislative focus, at least in this specific Senate proposal, is on this universal deduction boost that benefits a much wider group. This deduction is a powerful tool in its own right, quite distinct from those other legislative discussions. It operates directly on your overall taxable income, and as we've hammered home, for many, it could bring that figure right down to zero, regardless of where that income came from. It's a different mechanism with a different, and in this case, potentially much broader reach.
That is a crucial distinction. Thank you for laying that out so clearly. It really helps listeners understand precisely what kind of benefit is actually on the table here and how it might apply to their personal situation. Okay, so increasing your income, or rather reducing the tax bite on your income through things like this potential deduction boost, is hugely important. We've established that. But financial experts consistently highlight another crucial area for maximizing your financial health, especially when managing expenses matters so much, and that's strategically reducing your expenditures.
The other side of the ledger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's really a win-win approach that can significantly boost your overall financial well-being. It's not always about earning more. Sometimes it's about spending smarter. And we found a fascinating, easily accessible opportunity for you, our listeners, that fits perfectly into this philosophy. It's not about cutting back on necessities, not about deprivation, but about optimizing where your money goes for essential services you're likely already receiving and paying for.
That really raises a key question, doesn't it? Where can seniors find significant savings? Savings that are often overlooked, that don't involve, sacrificing their quality of life or things they genuinely need. And one of the single most impactful ways, according to the expert sources we reviewed, that many seniors can save a truly substantial amount of money, sometimes described as a boatload of money, is by getting a simple free review of their Medicare plans.
Medicare. Okay, that's something almost every senior interacts with, but maybe feels complicated.
It can definitely feel complicated, which is why many people just stick with what they have, even if it's not the best fit anymore. But this review process is designed to be the opposite of complicated. What does it actually involve? It's remarkably straightforward. Typically, it's just a simple phone call, maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, perhaps 15 minutes at the outside, with advisors who specialize exclusively in Medicare. That's all they do. They are the experts who can navigate this increasingly complex landscape for you. And maybe just to quickly clarify for listeners who might be new to Medicare or just find all the parts and plans confusing, when we talk about Medicare plans, we're generally covering a few key areas people need coverage for. You have Original Medicare, which is Part A for hospital stays, and Part B for doctor visits and outpatient care. Many people find that leaves gaps, right?
Co-pays, deductibles, prescription drugs.
Precisely. So then you have options to fill those gaps. Medigap plans, also called Medicare Supplement Insurance. These are sold by private companies, and they help pay those out-of-pocket costs from Original Medicare, the co-pays, deductibles. Then there are Medicare Advantage plans, also known as Part C. These are also from private companies approved by Medicare. They act as an alternative way to get your Part A and B benefits, often bundling in Part D prescription drug coverage, and frequently adding extras like vision, dental, or hearing aids. They usually have specific networks of doctors. And finally, Medicare Part D, which are standalone prescription drug plans for people who stick with Original Medicare or maybe have a Medigap plan without drug coverage. So this free review service we're talking about, it's really for anyone interacting with these options, whether you're currently enrolled and just want to optimize what you already have. Maybe you've had the same Medigap plan for years, or your Part D plan's costs have gone up, or your Medicare Advantage plan changed its network.
Or your needs have changed.
Exactly. Your health needs or prescriptions might have changed. Or it's also perfect if you're going through initial enrollment. Perhaps you're turning 65 soon, you're planning to retire, or you recently lost employer health coverage. These specialist advisors are equipped to help you understand all your options clearly, no matter your current situation or where you are in the Medicare journey, and the direct benefit. It's incredibly clear and practical. These advisors will diligently work to find you the best coverages available specifically in your local area. That's key because plan availability and costs vary significantly by county and state.
So it's personalized to where you live.
Highly personalized. They'll look for the best price point, absolutely, but also, crucially, the best fit for your personal health needs and preferences. This means ensuring you can continue to see the doctors and use the hospital networks you prefer, making sure all your specific prescription medications are covered adequately and at the lowest possible copay. It's about tailoring a plan that truly works for you, your budget, your health requirements, your lifestyle. Think of it like having a personal shopper, but for something as vital as your healthcare coverage. An expert who understands every nuance of the Medicare market, working solely on your behalf. And here it is, the crucial takeaway, the really compelling reason to take, 10 or 15 minutes out of your day for this free service. The average senior who takes advantage of this free review saves an impressive $1,100 annually.
Wow. $1,100 a year on average.
That's the average figure cited by the experts providing this service based on the thousands they've helped. Think about that. An additional $1,100 back in your pocket every single year for a relatively short, no obligation phone call.
That's an incredible return on investment for your time.
It really is. And that $1,100 can come from various places, maybe finding a plan with significantly lower monthly premiums, or reducing your co-pays for doctor visits and specialist appointments, or very commonly, finding a Part D or Medicare Advantage plan that covers your essential prescription medications much more affordably. We've heard countless scenarios described where seniors were unknowingly on plans that didn't cover their specific drugs well, leading to huge out-of-pocket costs at the pharmacy. Or they were paying high premiums for benefits or networks they didn't actually need or use simply because they weren't aware that better, more cost-effective options existed right there in their own local area. And why is this review process so effective? How can they find these savings? Well, these advisors have access to sophisticated tools and databases. They can analyze literally thousands of different plans our source mentioned, potentially looking through 20,000 plan variations across the entire country.
20,000, that's impossible for an individual to sift through.
Exactly. It's overwhelming. But they can filter and isolate the absolute best options available right in your specific zip code, cross-referencing them against your list of doctors, your preferred pharmacies, and your exact prescription drug list and dosages. This isn't something you can easily replicate doing a quick search on the Medicare website yourself. The sheer volume and complexity of the plans, the subtle differences in formularies and networks, makes it nearly impossible for an individual consumer to do a truly comprehensive comparison. This level of detailed, personalized review, tailored to your specific situation, is really invaluable. And I have to reiterate this point. It is a completely free service.
No obligation, no cost to the senior.
Correct. No obligation to enroll, no fee for the consultation. Thousands and thousands of people have already used services like this to save significant amounts of money. It's really a testament to how often people are simply on the wrong plan for their current needs, or are paying too much without even realizing it. The phone call